سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. Alhamdulillah, we're here today and we're taking a few classes. This class goes under the title of How to be a Taalibul Ilm. How to be a Taalibul Ilm. And one of the things that a Taalibul Ilm has to do, he has to be in place when the teacher shows up with his utensils and everything ready so that he doesn't miss anything or distract the teacher. So from this we find the hadith when the Messenger of Allah ﷺ used to talk, they used to sit so still that it was as if birds were sitting on their heads. And you know you have to sit very still for a bird to even come close to you, let alone to land on you and sit there. And this is used as an expression to show how still they sat. Nowadays, we take classes from the internet and we take them, in live as well. And the students are not having any respect for stillness and not distracting the teacher. From my experience, it's a lot of the chat boxes, everything, asking the teacher questions that have nothing to do with the topic, or not even waiting until the teacher gets his thoughts out of his head. Leave that alone, man. Gets his thoughts out of his head to ask him about something. So this is one of the jewels of being a Taalibul Ilm, is that the students have to learn how to sit still, and it's under the bab of listening attentively. It's under the chapter of listening attentively, paying attention and understanding not only the words that are said, but the intention of the speaker, what he intended with that speech. That's what it means to be a good listener, and not being distracted by things in your head that you can't follow the teacher. Another thing that a Taalibul Ilm has to remember is how to set up his page. Let's say this is his page. When he has his page, and let's say the page ends here, my estimation is to draw a line almost to the end of the page and then draw a line across. In this area here, this is where he will write his text and most of his explanation. Okay? In this line here, he will write vocabulary, any words that he doesn't understand, any question he has about a particular point. And the reason why this goes up and down is because let's say this is the text and he skips a line. Skip. Text. Skip. Text. Skip. Why is he doing this? He's doing this so that the text is already written out. Whatever he's supposed to study that day with the teacher, he's already written it out and skipped the line or made some space so that when he comes to class, he doesn't have to write it down. Again, so he can pay more attention, right? He can listen more effectively. And as he's following the explanation of the text, he can say, oh, I had a question here. You see this? He's following, oh, I had a question here. Question here. Now, how does he know his question's answered? He puts a line through it. It was answered. And then, so as not to forget, he writes down over here in small print. And I always say to write here on an angle. To write in an angle. Either up or down. It doesn't make a difference. At an angle. This is from the adab that we find in the olden text, that on the sideline, we call it the hamish. The text, some answers or something was written here. What does the skipped line mean then? The skipped line is as well for answers. For example, we have a particular text and there's a word right here that he does not understand. So then he puts a question mark there, or he puts a question mark here. right? And he overlines that word. Then let's say as he's going on, he doesn't interrupt the sheikh or the teacher. The teacher tells him the meaning of that word, and he writes that meaning right here. Intention. He writes it under there. So then he puts a line through his question. Right? Because he realizes this was the question. Let's say he didn't put it. That was a word I didn't understand. That's the meaning of it right there. You guys understand that? Now, all throughout the case, something hits his mind. Something comes across his mind. He wants to say something. He writes it down here. You understand? Now, he wants to, no, let the young boys do it. Let the young boys do it. Then he starts to write down here whatever comment or question he had. Okay? Anything he wanted to say. Yeah. Right over here. So that when he gets an opportunity, he can now ask, Ya Sheikh, Ya Ustad. And this is the adab. Ya Ustad, oh teacher, oh my Sheikh. It's weak. You say, and you don't have to say, I have a question. Because he's a teacher. She's a teacher. Obviously, if you said, Ya Ustad, Ya Ustada, oh professor, you have a question or a comment. There is nothing else you can have. Isn't that right, Dr. Saif? You know, you either have a question or you have a comment. We don't need to know which one. We can figure that out as you begin to talk. If you begin to say, you know what, I have a question. I have a question. I have a question. I have a comment. You're wasting time. You're wasting time. And all you have to say is, Ya Sheikh, and then, or Ya Ustad, Ya Ustada. Say, yes, ask your question. That's much simpler, and it makes the process go quicker. Do you guys understand that? Now, there's another point here. Being a Taalibul ilm, you have to learn how to ask a good question. Because if you do not know how to ask a good question, you're wasting time. And time, ya tulab, is the most important thing you have. There is no other commodity that is more precious to the believer, to the conscious individual, consciousness meaning taqwa, than time. So you don't want to waste it because you were not thinking of how to phrase your question. Does that make sense? So, let's review again. The Taalibul ilm, he makes an agreement with the teacher. That's what this is. An agreement. The agreement is this. The teacher will show up and teach you. Meaning, what does teach mean? Because we have to understand what this agreement is. That means they will explain to you something that you do not know for sure, that you are unclear about, or that you need some confirmation. Okay? Meaning you think you know it, but you have not been confirmed. And confirmation comes when that teacher comes. Why is he a teacher? Because he can claim, or she can claim, that his or her teachers told them, you are now qualified to teach what I have taught you, and I have learned it from my teachers who told me that I was qualified to teach it, and they have learned it from their teachers who told them, until it gets back to Mustafa sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Okay? And there is a point where some things you haven't learned directly from your teachers, but they gave you the foundation. And then they ajazakumul am. They gave you a general permission to teach because of the level that you've reached. Now you can study other things because you have all the tools. And so at our stage, what I encourage is the teaching of the tools. Because once you learn how to, first you get them, then you learn how to use them, then you can be more effective and you won't waste time. So, the agreement is the teacher will come ready to teach you those texts and those wise wisdom points that have been passed down to him or her. And on your side, you will be ready to learn. What does learning entail? Learning entails that you come to class not tired. Okay? The teacher can come to class tired because they're not making it up. They're coming, they're talking to you, they're telling you things that they know. Half the lessons I got in Mauritania, the Sheikh was laying down. Rahimahullah. Or he laid down while he was teaching the class. And it did not do anything but enhance the lesson. He relaxed and let it go. And we like it when he starts letting it go. Okay? So, you will be ready. The teacher ain't supposed to come to the class and wait for you. It's not that way. It's not the souk. It's not a marketplace where he waits for customers. No. The students should wait for the teacher. This is the adab. The students wait for the teacher to show up and they busy themselves. They need this time. Mentally preparing themselves first and foremost. Secondly, preparing their paper. Laying out their paper. Getting ready to learn whatever they have come that day to learn. Normally, it's upon the student to memorize whatever he wants to learn from the teacher. That is the way that I learned. And that is the best way in my estimation. For example, if you say you're going to learn hadith, then you memorize the hadith before you come to class if you're doing an intense study of it. If it's not, and you're going to go through the hadith, then that's not an issue. But then the issue should be that you should be able to read well. You can't study hadith if you can't read well. It's impossible for you to say you know the hadith and you can't even read it. Is that understandable? So, this is one thing. That's if it's hadith. If it's a text, a classical text, then you should know what the text is. And the first lesson should be about squaring away the language of the text. Meaning you go through the entire text, making sure the language is correct from the way the sheikh is going to teach you from your notes or your text that you have. So any words that are wrong, he corrects it. You go by your sheikh's wording. Not by the wording you have on your paper. Okay? He tells you the word, you say, but it says this and there. He'll say, well, put this here or leave that there. Depends up, it's his call. And you don't say, well, but, this one, I got this from Maktaba to, Boriki. They're good. No, you don't say that. Then go to Maktaba Boriki and have them teach you the text. You understand the point? If you're going to take it from the teacher, then take his language that he puts and interposes, or not interposes actually, but says belongs there. And that might be a riwayah, a narration. Everybody follow me? So you have that on the first lesson. So by the second lesson, whatever amount you think you can accomplish or that he will go over, you try to have it memorized and written down and spaced on the paper. You can't go over it enough because you haven't learned it yet, right? So you can sit with your companions, going over the text, thinking about good questions that might come up. And sometimes when you have questions already written out, the sheikh will go over them and you put a line through them. Not scribble, scrabble. One line through it. So the question can still be ascertained. It still can be read. You're not putting a line through it so you can't see it. You're putting a line through it to show that you got it answered. And more than likely, you should write down the answer. Because what happens sometimes, we forget. And we knew the answer at one time, but then we come back 10 years later, literally, and we look at that and says, man, I wish I would have wrote that down. I wish I would have written it down. And that would have been some greater benefit for you at that time. So we say a little dried ink is stronger than the strongest memory. It lasts longer. Okay? A little dried ink lasts longer than the strongest memory. Because the person may die, but that ink that's dried on that paper may stay and then benefit those who remain behind. This is what I have for you guys as a lesson today. One lasting point. The purpose of learning is, and that's general. This is general. The purpose of learning is also including the purpose of teaching, is to enable the student, this is from the teacher's perspective, to enable the student to get along without the teacher. It has to be an end product, an end acquisition of skill that you can do that you couldn't do before. To enable the student to get along without the teacher. From the student's perspective, it is to make something clear. To walk away with clarity. Something that was not clear in the beginning. Or that you thought was clear, now you know it is. Because you've got confirmation. So when you've learned something, it means something has become clear. Don't say to the teacher, "Oh, I never knew that." Okay. Now you know. That's why you came. No, seriously. Some people say, "Well, you're saying that. I never heard that before." Well, alhamdulillah. Praise Allah. Because you came, and hopefully you didn't come just to hear what you already knew. Because if you only come to class and only hear what you already knew, then you've never learned anything. Where do you expect to pick up new information? Except in the classroom. So be easy. And if you doubt the information, then don't go to that class. Because you don't want to fill your head up with doubts. Don't want to fill your head up with doubts. أقول قولي هذا. I'm sorry. Is there any questions at this time? Yes, sir. Can I lay down and answer them? Yes, I can, and I will when I get tired. I love laying down and answering questions. Yes, any questions? Are there any questions? Okay, if there are no questions for me, ladies, are there any questions? Yes, sir. Okay, that's a very good question. Alhamdulillah. Why do we put one line? Why don't we put checks through it? Is that your question? Okay. This question was asked, I don't know who asked it, but I remember being present when someone put a cross on a line. And the sheikh said, "Don't do that. We're not Christians." Okay? And they were very sensitive about putting the cross on something. He said, second, he said, we used to hear the people of hadith, because everything is training you to be ahlul hadith. Okay? Because at the end of the Taalibul road, you are a scholar of hadith. Ultimately, because you need those to do any science. So, in the science of hadith, he said, we used to hear them saying, "Idrib alayhi darban." Strike it with your marker. Strike that with a darb. And it's only one darb, not two. So the reason why we don't put a cross on it is two. Number one, we're not promoting the cross. Okay? Number one. And we're sensitive about that. Number two, from following the adab and the manners of those people of the hadith that came before us, they used to put one line through it. So we followed them and put one line through it. So we can all follow the same adab throughout the centuries. Does that answer your question? Okay. Yes, sir. Excuse me? Promoter? Promoting. Okay. Promoting means we're not ones. Thank you. That was a very good question as well. Promoting means we're not pushing to see the cross put everywhere. Okay? We're Muslims, so we don't want to see a cross all over the place. The cross is a sign of the Christians. Are we Christians? So then we don't put the sign of the Christians everywhere we go. You understand? And yes, sir. I can't understand you. What is a total what? What is a Taalibul ilm? Alhamdulillah. A Taalibul ilm literally means someone who is seeking knowledge. What it is, though, he is a mujahid. He is someone who is fighting fi sabilillah. He is fighting to establish La ilaha illallah Muhammadan Rasulullah in the land. And he starts off by raising up the ignorance of shirk and kufr from himself and those around him. Okay? They say you free your mind, your backside will follow. Okay? You free your heart from being attached to your own ego and other things like that. Then your heart is free now, right, to worship Allah and only Allah. You understand? So that's what it is. Yes, sir. Yes, we'll be going over many texts. In what regard are you asking your question? For Taalibul ilm? Okay, at this point, what I'm trying to do is, yes, we will be going over some texts, but it also depends on the strength of the student. Okay? It's from the adab of the Taalibul ilm to go over as many of the classical texts with regards to being a Taalibul ilm as he can. However, we found the students these days weak and unable to have the stomach, the taste to go through those texts. So what we've been doing is mentioning points from amongst those books. But if you guys have the stomach for it, we can go through those texts, and it's a very beautiful thing at the end of the road. When you finish reading it through the many different texts that the Taalibul ilm has, or they're out there, the classical ones, you understand a lot of things differently. And it affects the rest of your life as a Taalibul ilm. Okay? But again, the people have not shown a predilection to do the long work. They want what we call the gist of it. What does it mean when you get the gist of something? Yeah, right. They want to summarize a version of it. So hit me quick so I can keep going. So we are phasing these classes to feed that desire so that we can get them accustomed to that, and then maybe as they go along, they develop more of a strength, more of a taste. They can handle more. Does that make sense? Inshallah ta'ala. There are no questions for me. I have a few questions for you. Why do we set up our page in this fashion? What do we use? What do we set this side of the page up for? What's that? Right, vocabulary. Any words or any comments that we need to put with regards to each line so we can follow that line, right? What do we do down here on the bottom of the page or at the last third of the page? Because this should be 75, this should be 25, percentage-wise. Yes, sir. Write your questions and comments. Well, some of your comments, explanation will be here, yeah, but longer questions and answers of them will be down here. Okay? So you want questions and answers, and there'll be answers all throughout. Why are we skipping a line? Right, that's a good answer. Why? For what? What are we going to write? What things? No, that's not a good enough answer, sir. Yes, sir. No, that's vague. It's not vague. What do you say? No, that's incorrect. The key points come over here, and the comments and questions and answers come down here. Why do we skip a space? Yes. And that's not totally incorrect, but that's not what I told you guys. Right. Over it. We put the correct word over it when you can. If you can't, then you put it under it or even at the side. Yes. No ums. Go again. Raise your voice. No. Listen, yes, sir. Right, that's the main reason. The main reason for the space between the text is if the sheikh defines the words in the text. Those particular words are what you focused on here. And then the whole concept Conceptualizations are on the side. But we really put, if he mentions a word and he says this word means this and this word needs to be like this and then you write that here. And if it's too much for that, then you come over here and you might put number 1 and put number 1 here and start writing right there. So you know that's what this is following number 1. Okay? Remember your number. He starts saying something here, you find it too much, write 2 over here, and you start writing down the rest of it over here. But this is to define the words in the text. All those particular words. If he mentions them. And if you don't know any of those words, you have to stop at the end and say, sir, you mentioned this particular word. What does that mean? How can I understand it more? And then that ustad will go through that word and explain it to you. Inshallah. All right, that's your class for today. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.